Hi, my name's Tucker. I'm calling about the 240Zs that you have listed.
Uh-huh.
I get your number from lead off of Facebook Marketplace. I was
Yep.
curious as to what you had left.
Well, let's see. Like, four 240s, they're all 71s, and 75 280.
And a 75 280. Okay. And the 71 240s, are they in decent shape or parts cars or restorable?
Two are restorable. Maybe the third one might be restorable if you're not afraid, but it's missing a lot of parts. But the chassis isn't too bad. And, I mean, you could, but one is fairly good. I used to drive it a lot. Actually, I used to drive two of them, but one got really rusty. And it was, not doing anymore.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, understood. I have a 72 in my garage right now that I'm dealing with the rust issues on. So,
Yeah.
I'm definitely interested in taking a look at them. What's your availability like? Okay, yeah, no, tomorrow's good. So, all right, I'll give you a ring tomorrow and get the address from you, and we'll see you then.
Okay, great.
All right, appreciate it. And your
Thanks
name?
for calling. My name's Mike. My
Mike.
name's Mike. What's yours again?
Tucker.
Tucker. Okay, yeah. Maybe we'll see you tomorrow. Have a
Excellent.
good day.
Yep, thank you very much. You too, Mike.
You're welcome.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
And that is exactly why this shit is so dangerous. I happened to catch an ad a woman put up for a Nissan 240SX, a 1971. Obviously, in 71, they didn't make a 240SX thanks to Facebook Marketplace's new algorithms and erroneous bullshit. You can't list stuff for what it actually is anymore with prices as to what you actually want to ask anymore. For example, if I wanted to list this car for sale, I would have to put some BS price of 1, 2, 3, 4 or 9999999 because you can only list things for what Kelly Blue Book says they are in the acceptable range, which I get it's cut down on spam, but really it just makes everything more of a headache. Whatever. Long story short, this guy apparently has four 240Zs. They're listed from anywhere between $1,100 and $1,500. The 75 that's in the picture, super rough. Like it would be a patina car for sure. But in speaking to the woman that gave me his information, she seems to think that he'll let go of two of the 71 240s for $1,500. I have a problem. Shit like this makes that problem worse. That being said, if I can find one of those cars that has the rocker that I need, the trunk support that I need, any of the interior pieces that I'm missing, that makes this whole shebang worth it. So I am going to take a drive down tomorrow, or maybe Thursday, as you heard the kind gentleman say, and see what he's got. So second things first, I want to apologize about the lack of content over the past couple of weeks. I am in the middle of like 27 different DIY home renovation projects, and I just honestly haven't had the energy to get out here. Pretty confident that I also had the coronavirus. I know I joked about that a lot, but I've been feeling like warm over death for the past month or so. Probably should get tested, but I'm alive and kicking, so we're going to keep on keeping on. We've reached a critical point in this build in that I still have not gotten the new lights and ceiling up. I will get there, I promise. But the more that I think about this, I kind of want to take a similar approach to this car that I did with the Exocet. And that was build the entire thing, get it running, take it apart, make it nice. So what I mean by that is we have a motor and transmission in here, right? Things that we're missing to make it run: radiator, hoses, fans, wiring, which is really, I'm making a DIY harness, so this thing should run pretty easily, and fuel. And what I want to do before I completely strip the chassis, start sandblasting stuff, start power washing stuff. Well, I'm going to power wash it, but before I start sandblasting stuff, I want to get everything basically to a point where it's running. And the reason for doing so is that allows me to do stuff like weld exhaust hangers to the chassis, weld fuel pump mounts to the chassis. That light just got really loud. It heard me talking about it. I need to do that soon. Basically, any of the... It allows me to make any modifications to the chassis that I need to fit the new driveline in it without worrying about damaging anything that I've just restored. So it's in its current state inside. It's not going to rust any more than it is. So I'm not in a huge rush to get all the paint off of it. And once you get all the paint off of it, then you have to get primer onto it quickly. Otherwise, you start introducing more oxidation problems. So with that being said, tonight, I believe I am going to make the first steps and plunge into building out the exhaust. I also found, so speaking of that guy, Mike, super nice guy, by the way, if he's watching this, cool, looking forward to meet you. I found a basically mint condition hood that had a cowl grafted into it extremely well that the current owner thinks is super ugly. I honestly, from the pictures, doesn't look that bad. It's like 20 minutes away. I'm gonna go take a look at it for 40 bucks. Can't go wrong. It's basically the stock cowl, but the rear end of it has been extended 2.5 inches, most likely to accommodate, you know, like a Holly 4-barrel and a big dumb air cleaner on a 350 car. The other thing that I want to do tonight, in addition to starting to build out the exhaust, is drop the intake manifold on the truck intake. Oh, wherever it is in my mess of garbage. Drop the truck intake on, lay the hood on top, see what we have for clearance, see if it's going to jive. If that's the case, then I'm totally going to blow off this other hood. But I need a solution, right? And if I can avoid going to a lesser flowing intake in the name of space, then that's great. So I don't want to sacrifice power, right? Okay, so this is a 72240Z, which to the state of Connecticut means that they do not give a shit what comes out the back of the tailpipe as long as you pay your taxes. Okay, there's no emissions testing on cars older than 25 years in the state of Connecticut. I can sleep well at night because I know that the engine that I'm putting in this is more efficient and burns fuel betterer than the L24 that I pulled out of it, okay? No air pump, no EGR, no nothing, just raw engine to raw engine. This one is way more efficient than the 50-plus-year-old design, okay? What I am going to do is use the truck log-style manifolds. The reason being, they're decent enough on power. This flange right here allows you to do whatever the hell you want with the rest of the system, okay? From the factory, these had 2-inch ID piping. I'm going to keep the same 2-inch piping, primarily because I want this thing to sound like a sports car. I don't want it to sound like Bubba's lifted 1500 Silverado on 33s with knobby tires, that every single time you leave a stoplight, you just hear that bah, bah. And then you go to the next stoplight and you hear bah, and then you hear the slow automatic shift. So it's like bah. I don't want any of that, all right? I want it to sound like it belongs, all right? So by using a narrower diameter exhaust pipe, 2-inch specifically, in a true dual fashion, that means no H-pipe, no crossover, no any of that, I should be able to isolate the good sounds from both sides of the engine and plumb them both out the back in a means that gives us a throaty exhaust note, decently loud, without getting super drony. There's a couple of things that need to go into this though, okay? We want to accomplish something that is bearable at idle while still sounding cool. Does not drone on the highway, because droning on the highway is awful. The second you have more than 5 minutes of it, my eardrums just want to fall apart. Third thing is, these cars are notorious because of the teardrop shape of the rear of them. They create a nice, I'm guessing you can see this, a sweet low pressure zone of air right behind where the hatch comes down and where the exhaust is. So if you do not design the exhaust correctly on these cars, they weren't from the factory, you ultimately end up getting exhaust fumes sucked back into the cabin, and it smells and it stinks and it sucks, right? I had that problem with the Exoset, which is kind of why I had to design this goofy exhaust and end up with downturns and side stuff and whatever. But anyways, low pressure zone at the back of the car, bad, sucks exhaust fumes in, smells, it's annoying, right? So log style manifolds, 2-inch diameter piping all the way through, no crossovers, no X-pipes, no any of that. We're going to use Thrush Turbo is the name of the muffler, welded chambered mufflers. I've used these mufflers on a couple of projects in the past, specifically that goofy vet swapped E300 with the upside down things, and I loved how that car sounded, like really enjoyed how that car sounded. I've also used them on supercharged Subarus because I did that. Give it a little. And a couple other things. Anyways, I know that I've bought like 8 of these mufflers, so they've gone on things and I know how they sound. So I like the sound. I like that they have a limited amount of rasp. And the chambered welded design means that they won't start blowing fiberglass out of them after like 60 miles. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and get the manifolds bolted onto the motor. I'm going to get the downpipes off because the guy that cut these apart were nice enough to leave me that. So I actually have O2 bungs and everything. I'm going to start with those and hope that they fit. I'm gonna be using a combination of pie cuts and mandrel bends. I'll get to what each of those are when we get there, if you guys don't know what they are. I guess we'll go from there. I just realized that I'm missing the driver front caliper on the driver's side. Front brake caliper. Not there. So gonna have to add that to the list. I get an A+ for observation skills. Like my I Spy game, super on point as long as I know what I'm looking for. General observation, not so good. Is this even a Datsun? I wonder if I bought an RX-7. Hey, anyways, let's get to it. Status update. Not great. Again, I shouldn't say that. It's not great. It's just a curveball. When I made all my initial measurements with the exhaust manifolds, I did so before I found that extra 5 inches that I was looking for. And in doing so, I hosed myself with the stock manifolds. So looks like we're gonna have to build some custom manifolds for this, which is, again, fine. Ironically enough, if I had the driver's side design on the passenger side and the passenger side design on the driver's side, I could probably make it work. I'm going to find a source of light. I have heard your cries for more light in the engine bay, and what I've done is I have found a small halo ring mount, well, basically a ring light that works. Ring light that mounts to my camera. How's that? What that'll do is allow me to get my camera into smaller areas that I'm trying to show you guys and fully illuminate that area. So appreciate that feedback. Again, you know, any feedback that you guys have, more than welcome. If I overlook things, like I can't believe that I did with that driver's side caliper, you know, please feel free to advise me. In the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and flip this around and show you guys what we're talking about. So here we are with a dilemma. I mentioned that if I had the passenger side on the driver's side and the driver's side on the passenger side, we would be good to go. What we've got here on the passenger side is a nice little kick out at the end of the manifold. Because of the design of V8 motor, you have offset cylinder bank or offset cylinders on the way back because that's what you have to have in order to have 8 of them in a V formation. So on this side, the last spark plug is after the last collector. On the driver's side, the last spark plug is before the last collector. What that does is it forces the entire exhaust manifold back on the driver's side, and on the passenger side, keeps it a little bit more forward. This jog out is to compensate for that, and what it jogs out into is directly into the frame rail. So my initial plan, when this thing was further forward this way, like 3 inches further forward, was to just correct that with a nice pie cut pipe and sneak it right down through past the transmission, which I believe you could see. Yep. So sneak it right past through the transmission where there's a nice like 3.5 inch air gap there. As you saw in that time lapse, I furiously had to try and get the heat shields off because I will like to use the factory heat shields. Factory heat shields are good regardless of what people will tell you. They do things like shield heat, and they were actually designed for this shit. So good thing to keep. They suck, they rattle, but for all intents and purposes, when you're putting something somewhere that doesn't belong, it's good to have protection. Onto the driver's side. Remember how I was so proud of my motor mount and how I completely eliminated any of the clearance concerns that we had around the steering shaft? That's the steering shaft coupler. That is where the exhaust wants to live. Behind that is nice open space. All I need to do is take the exhaust manifold flanges and run the exhaust manifold actually down the contour of the block and then out. It's a very simple fix. It's unfortunately labor intensive. It means more custom parts unless I could find something pretty slick. It's not going to cost me anything. I think, you know, weld up manifold kits are like $60, right? So it's more of a labor and fitment thing. It's put it in, tack it in place, pull it out, finish weld it, put it back in. Cool part about that is it's not going to be a rusty pile of crap, so I don't have to worry about media blasting the manifolds, having them coated, and then them eventually looking like shit 3 months later, because that's what always happens. Undetermined as to whether I just lop off these exhaust flanges on the manifold, or if I actually go with a new kit. I guess I'll see what I can find on the old interwebs. What I am going to do, though, is pause the exhaust until I finish out the manifolds, because if I build out the rest of it, I'm going to be in a world of pain trying to make the two connect in that small space. I'm doing floors because it is still early, and I just can't ignore them anymore, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get everything set up, try and get the light inside. If you have not done large-scale sheet metal replacement on a car, the smartest way that I've found to do it personally is to cut out all of the bad, and cut a little bit beyond it, because what doesn't look bad is probably bad. And then make a template out of cardboard. Luckily for me, we are Amazon people, so I just have like a bazillion boxes, right? So I'm gonna mock the whole thing out in cardboard. Finally get the sheet metal out of the back of the truck that's been sitting there for 4 weeks now. It's flat, doesn't take up any space, and I haven't driven anywhere because we're all Corona Queens on this Coronacation. Mock everything up. Probably do spot weld install. I do not have faith that putting stitch weld's amount of heat into the trans tunnel, the floors, everything else will not drastically warp this sheet metal. So what I'm gonna do is overlap everything on the floor and then drill holes periodically along the replacement panels, spot weld it to the transmission tunnel, and use seam sealer the entire duration of it. Seam sealer, for those who are uninitiated, is basically like the world's craziest super glue. They assemble entire cars with it. It is probably single-handedly responsible for all of the NVH elimination in cars from, I don't know, 95 till now. Go drive like a 93 Ford pickup in good shape and listen to how shitty everything sounds, right? The squeaks, the rattles, the general looseness of the feeling of the whole vehicle, right? And pick anything from the 90s or 80s or 70s or whatever. And then go drive like a 2009 Lexus ES350, right? Like a hopped up Camry. That entire car is seam sealed, spot welded and seam sealed. And what the seam seal does is it essentially creates a continuous bond without transferring any heat and potentially warping or weakening the structure of the metal itself. So seam sealer, good. Technology, good. Again, theme, continuous improvement. So I'm going to start on the driver's side just because it's a little bit less of a hassle. I have seat rails that are still in good shape, and I'm over on this side. So I'm going to get things set up, and I will be right back. Welcome back, all you Quarren Queens. Good results. So that's cool. I always knew that the driver's side floor was going to be in better shape than the passenger side floor. What I was not expecting was to find a fully intact frame rail. What's really cool about that is that I have an exact reference point from which to work with. In exchange, I did have to lose the rearmost seat mount, which is fine because it's really just a cross member with 2 holes for studs to go through. I've been contemplating swapping the seats out for something a little bit more comfortable. The more time that I spend in the seats, I'm not a very big dude. I'm 6 foot, 180-ish pounds. And the more time that I spend sitting in the seats, the less time I think that they're going to be appropriate for someone of my build. I have a long inseam, and because of that, the seats just fall a little bit short. So I'm thinking about putting seats that are more suited to my size in anyway. So losing the rear seat mount wasn't the end of the world. I can still put something in place that if the previous or the future owner wants to, they could swap in factory seats and go from there. All right, so what we have here is a hole on purpose. I'm sure you guys saw me cutting, yanking, all of that. Luckily for me, extremely luckily for me, the sound deadening is so old and crusty that little chisel right there and that 3-pound sledge at a slight angle, I was able to chip up most of it. That stuff is hell on cutoff wheels and Sawzall blades. I strongly advise removing it if you're going to try and cut through it. It is not worth the destruction of the blade for the ease of convenience of not removing it first. So, as I mentioned, full frame rail, intact, a little crispy in certain areas, like right here, right there, but the structural integrity of it is really good. One of the things that I'm sure you noticed is that there were certain areas that I was cutting that there was a lot of sparks flying off. And what happens, these aluminum zinc, zinc oxide, aluminum oxide zip wheels, when they hit carbon steel, they create a crap ton of sparks. Okay, and the areas that that there was no sparking are largely oxidized or rusted out areas. So it's kind of like a litmus test. If there was a litmus test for rusty floors, that would be it. Sparks, good metal. No sparks, probably no metal, probably bad. But what I did is I highlighted around, well, I went around to where I felt comfortable, where the sheet metal was in good enough shape that I could apply patch panels to the area and create a solid foundation for the floor. The other critical component to this is that in a unibody car, the floor is part of the structure of the car. So how good we do here is it directly correlates to the overall rigidity of the car. Now, there's certain areas that I left, like this point right here. This is actually really solid metal. I could have cut all the way back to here, but this gives me a reference point for where the bottom of the floor is supposed to be. Okay, if I had cut it up to here, it would have been kind of a guessing game and a lot of triangulation. So leaving a little bit of the solid structure allows you a good reference point for where you need to be. Same thing when we move up here. Again, could have cut all this out. You can see that I did cut out a section here, but this is all in good shape. It's a little bit crusty. It's got a little bit of oxidation on the top, but I hit it with a 24 grit wheel afterwards, and there's plenty of metal content here. Again, this gives me a point where I can build off of, right? So even though I'm going to cover this entire thing with this, I know exactly where the depth needs to be to hit my frame rail and then to hit the bottom of the tunnel over here. I was super lucky on this side, aside from this one little tiny area right here, that the bottom of this is almost a 90-degree bend. It's probably like a 115-degree bend off of this surface. So I was able to drop this all the way down, and I'm going to be able to run right up to it with pretty limited amount of customization. Up here, a little bit more of a cluster than I anticipated. This is actually where the stub rail starts to go into the engine bay. I had a giant hole right here, so I had to cut this out. I started hitting this, and parts of it fell apart and parts of it were solid. The rail itself is super solid. What I'm honestly probably going to do is pour 15 over this and then encapsulate it with some good steel so that no further oxidization occurs in there. It's not the most ideal, but I don't feel comfortable cutting any more of this without compromising the frame's actual straightness. As far as things go in here, again, you know, I mentioned this in the very first video. The rockers and the exterior frame rails or frame components are in great shape. You know, a little bit of oxidation here from where the weather seal just collects a little bit of water, but nothing serious. You know, paint's in good shape. Of course, the screws all stripped because that's just what screws do. Phillips head screws on cars, bad idea. Look really nice, bad idea. So next episode is going to be a little bit different. I am actually going to take you guys with me to check out those Z's that I was talking about at the beginning of this episode. And then I am going to mock up the floors with all the cardboard that I was talking about, take those cardboard templates out, trace them onto the sheet steel using nice wax pen, cut them out with the plasma cutter. Side note, we didn't use the plasma cutter on here. I know somebody's going to ask this question. We didn't use the plasma cutter to cut the exterior out of the floors because plasma cutters make fire. And there's a lot of old shit in here that is very flammable, specifically that sound deadening. And when it catches on fire, it smells awful and it makes really, really, really nasty black toxic clouds of smoke. So wrong time to be inhaling that, thanks to good old pandemic. I will catch you guys in my truck with the trailer tomorrow. So thanks for tuning in, and buenas noches, señores.